What's going on, everybody? It's your buddy Dustin Warncke, your best buddy ever, your best friend forever. Just thought I would do this podcast because yesterday I was trying so hard to get this podcast recorded, and I had every intention of doing it, and just life gets in the way. How many times have we had a situation like that where life just gets in the way? Here I am. And I'm doing this show today because I think this is going to be something we all need to hear. And that is, what language does the divine, does the universe, God, whatever you want to call the being that, or the being of light that created all this, what language does that being speak? Does the divine speak? Does the universe speak? What is a language that is universal to that? So I posted a Facebook post yesterday on my personal Facebook, which you can find me, Dustin Vaughn Warncke, VAUGHNWARNCKE. You can follow me on there. You can friend request me. My friend request has been full. I got 5,000 friends, and a lot of it is due to business stuff, but and old high school, college friends, that kind of stuff. But I've kind of cleaned some of that out. If you would like to message me on there, whatever, it's all open. Okay, you're welcome to message me directly on Facebook. I've been in Facebook jail a number of times too, by the way, but it isn't for anything you would think about. It's for selling exotic animals, which is one of the many things that I do in the outdoor industry. So I don't mean Tiger King stuff. I mean axis deer and all those things that we have in Texas, fallows, all those kind of things that we have in Texas that go onto ranches and for hunting, or just because people have money and like to look at new stuff besides just whitetail. So that's one of the many roles that I do with what I do in business. So let me read you this post. It seems like every time I post something on Facebook like this, like my followers don't engage with it, but if I post something about hunting or anything like that, they're all over it. So I guess that's just the audience that I have. But I'd love for you to join me on Facebook, Instagram, whatever platform. Send me a message. So here we go. Some reflections on my past and here we go. Some reflections on my personal and professional journey lately. I heard the quotes I posted in here in the past, but they rang true as I'm finally in an isolated place out in the country, all by myself in my own space most times. Silence is indeed the language of God. And with all the noise that we have going on in our world today, it is easy to let silence be replaced with that constant distractions, or with all the constant distractions that our world delivers every moment of every day. I have learned to sit in silence, work in silence, and pray in complete silence. This allows me to listen to the divine presence which resides inside of my soul. When I started in awareness and practice of this and asking God questions like, what would you have me do? What would your will be for me? I began seeing answers to some of my problems that I never saw before. Solutions began to appear, and I realized that when you walk in God's path and not alternatively trust in your own thoughts and emotions, doors of opportunity open in places you never thought possible. And I'm going to get into my photo gallery and here on my phone and read some of these quotes that I posted relative to what I wrote just there. I kind of got some of these because it kind of goes back to Eckhart Tolle's however I say his name thing. He has a book out about the language of God being silence. I forget exactly what that book is called, but he's a very insightful spiritual leader. And so one of his quotes is, "In the silence of the heart, God speaks." Rumi, which is a poet that goes back to, gee whiz, I guess, several hundred years. He was a Islamic poet. But he was very, it wasn't about the religion so much, it was about the poetry that he came up and was kind of inspired by. His quote is, "Silence is the language of God. All else is a poor translation." I like that one. And then I had this one kind of as an offshoot. "God didn't remove the Red Sea, he parted it. He isn't going to remove the situation, but he will make a way through it. Trust that God is always on time, even when we think that he is too late." again, you've heard this before, God's timing is perfect timing. So again, I just want to inspire you to those kind of things. And then I've got one last one, I think. No, a couple more. Couple more nuggets of wisdom and inspiration for your day. Um, is there a difference between happiness and inner peace? Yes. Happiness depends on conditions being perceived as positive. Inner peace does not. That's another Eckhart Tolle quote. And one more by Eckhart Tolle. Be the silent watcher of your thoughts and behavior. You are beneath the thinker. You are the stillness beneath the middle noise. You are the love and joy beneath the pain. So I just wanted to bring you some, quotes from other authors and spiritual leaders from the past and present. Eckhart's still alive. That I haven't really brought to this podcast before. And again, I don't really consider this a religious-based podcast because I'm not really a fan of, organized religion in that respect. But I'm starting to get back into some communities and that kind of stuff, like my old church that I went to before I moved away. Met with the pastor the other day and that kind of stuff, and just told him, I said, I've got a really hybrid melting pot of belief systems here, where I'm open-minded, but not too open-minded. I know what I want, I know what I believe, but I draw from other, religions and religious leaders and that kind of stuff, that are spiritual leaders that are in the spiritual space for inspiration and for, just kind of a deeper understanding of the meaning of life and this conscious existence that we share in this physical embodiment that we call life. Some of us are here for a while, some of us aren't. And so, that's the thing. Like, I really try to make sure that I share some of that with you to empower you on your journey, because this is the Empowered Life podcast, and that's the whole idea, is to try to give you hope by the spoonful so you can make the best choices, so you can, do the best things. How many times do we see the worst thing in our life and look back in history of our own life, our own circumstances, our own situation, and see, okay, I learned the lesson from that. What did I learn from that? If you're not learning the lessons through your difficult circumstances, you're missing the boat. There's a lesson being taught in every difficult circumstance, whether it be a loss of a loved one. There's a company I work for who's the female part of that company just lost her dad at 65 years old, and that's pretty young, for these days where we have longer longevity. And her and her dad were so close. And I reached out to her because I have some grief training from some of the volunteer work stuff that I've done, and just listened, and just basically just honored her dad's life. I didn't know her dad personally, but told her that everything's gonna be okay. And don't, if somebody's going through a grieving process, or bereavement, or loss, or anything like that, certainly don't be the one that says, "Oh, he's in a better place now," or just tell them you're there for them, you're praying for them, you're supporting them, and be there, be a listening ear. That's the best thing you can do in a grieving situation. We're all going to face loss, okay? Whether it be loss of something material, loss of money, loss of a loved one. And really, when those kind of things happen, I think that the most important things become evident in our lives, such as it's the people that you love, not the money and the stuff, that make you rich. That is actually a quote from a song by Alan Jackson. Alan Jackson wrote the song, I forget what, The Older I Get, that's the song. So I'm not really big into country music, but one of my former managers shared that song with me, who was older than, about 20 years older than me, when she first shared it with me. And that's kind of stuck with me, It's the people you love, not the money and stuff, that make you rich. And you see that when you go through difficult circumstances, because it doesn't matter how much you have. It matters to just getting through the day. And who's there to support you? Is your friends and family your support system? If you don't have a support system, there's one out there. You just have to find it. Don't ever isolate yourself completely. And I'm not, even though I'm out here in the country, like I wrote. I'm out in the country, and I'm isolated in my little tiny space that I'm living in here, and I love it. It's a great little bachelor pad I got going on here. And but it also puts me, about 15 minutes away from my kiddo in the same city, just kind of on the other side of town, where I can help Jackson do his own thing, and be more supportive and co-parent after this divorce that I had about 3 years ago. That when all that started, that I can be there for him and be a support system for him. And he also has a little place that he can stay when he comes stays with me. He's got his own room and everything else in my little tiny space here. But this is what I wanted. Like, this is something that manifested to me, and it's perfect. It's just absolutely, like, better than what I expected God to do. But the thing is, to really get there, you have to surrender, okay? And I think a lot of people miss that. They want to trust God in all things, but then they do things their own way. They want to trust the universe. They want to trust the divine plan for their life, manifest destiny, whatever you want to call it. But then they go their own way. And it doesn't work that way. You can't serve two masters. You can't serve your own, desires and wishes and everything else and God's at the same time. Kind of goes back to the old saying, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plan. Because likely the plan that God has for you is bigger than what you could ever imagine. And again, I've always had a goal of sitting in silence and working in silence and everything else. But where I've lived in the past, it's always been with somebody else. I never really had that opportunity to have my own space like I do out here, and really just television or whatever else. You just turn it off and just be silent and just listen. Just listen. If you've got a problem, one of the things that I learned from one of the great podcasters of our time, Sam Crowley, who does the Everyday Saturday podcast, great podcast, about entrepreneurship and personal growth and those kind of things, motivation and those kind of things. He's one of the ones that inspired me to write all these books and that kind of stuff over the years. Anyway, he says the secret to having it all is realizing you already do. And I've touched about that on other shows and that kind of stuff. But I mean, the whole idea is, what do you really need? What are you really missing in your life? Because you look around and realize you got everything in front of you to move forward and to live another day and to survive in some cases. I've been in survival mode, a lot of areas of my life. Recently, and then back in my childhood, my parents divorced when I was 5 years old. I've gone through a lot of struggles. A lot of people haven't. I often share the story that my mom and dad separated, divorced when I was 5. Doesn't matter the circumstances around that, but I had that's one reason why I think I developed into what they call a Sigma male, or at least a part of Sigma male, kind of a lone wolf, is that I was an only child and had, kind of a turbulent childhood. But the thing is, I use that not as an excuse, not as some kind of a crutch or anything like that. I use that to empower me to be the best version of myself that I can be, and to show other people who have gone through a situation similar to that or other hardships that you can, that you can move on, that you can become the best version of yourself despite your circumstances, besides all the negative stuff that life throws at you, okay? Because there's plenty of stuff that's going to be thrown at you. You can't control that, all right? What you can control is what you can control. Control the controllables. And I talk about that in my books. I've talked about that on the podcast and that kind of stuff before. Don't let the world get you down, okay? Kind of like the old kind of urban saying, don't let the man get you down, But the whole idea and the concept behind that is, let your spiritual warfare be won by light and love, and don't go to the dark side, to use a Star Wars reference. A lot of times you'll see people that are coping with situations go to drugs or alcohol or sex or a variety of different other things to try to cope, and those are unhealthy addictions, unhealthy habits. And remember that your habits are defined by your behavior. Your habits also form your character. So it's not about what you are going through and enduring, it's who you're enduring it for. Like the intention. I believe God really looks at our heart and our intention of what happens, okay? Because God knows everything. God experiences the whole world from your eyes, from your body, from your emotion, because you have life inside of you. And one thing that science has been trying to do for a long time is create life from unliving things. Think about Frankenstein, as a fictional tale. I like Young Frankenstein because I'm a big fan of Mel Brooks movies. Because he made fun of everybody, A lot of people say, oh, you couldn't make those movies today, like Blazing Saddles and that kind of stuff, because, it's so, would be considered so racist. But he kind of poked fun at every race, and kind of just made a satire out of how we use racism in our culture and that kind of stuff, which I don't agree with racism at all. I've got several black, Asian, Hispanic, so on and so forth friends, and I have kind of like a multi-product diversity in my life with my support system, which is great, because there's insights from experiences from each one of those people, from what they grew up culturally and everything like that, with their parents and the parents before them, and so on and so forth. So what I'm getting to, though, is that it makes sense to be inclusive and be diverse, and take life as it comes. Don't sit there and be hard-nosed, and it's kind of like the story of People who, who were, God sent them people to rescue them. They're in the water or whatever, and they get to heaven and they say, "You didn't come rescue." Well, they're expecting God to literally come down and rescue them. Send some angels or whatever. And they're three people that have come by, offered to pick them up, and they're still waiting on God. Well, God's waiting on you. If you're waiting on God, God's waiting on you. And I'm not saying that it certainly doesn't say in the Bible, but that God helps those who help themselves. That's nowhere in Scripture. But at the same time, you can't just sit there and do nothing and expect the divine to basically intercede for you and give you a handout. Okay, it's not like welfare. It's not like the government. God appreciates those, and it says very well in King Solomon's one of my favorite authors of the Old Testament, Proverbs and Ecclesiastes. If you listen to the show, you know that. Um, Back out of your whole idea and look at the business book, as I call it, of Proverbs. The wise man does this, the foolish man does this. And pretty much to summarize part of what Proverbs says, you work, you eat. You don't work, you don't eat. And I've had to teach that to a couple of people in my life, professionally and personally. That if you don't put forth the effort to see what you become in the process, that's the most important part of anything. It's not achieving the goal. Because the thing is, you don't want to get addicted to the disease of more than the disease to please. You don't want to get addicted to that. Because you can sit there and goal after goal after goal. I used to be addicted to accomplishment, But the thing is, it never fulfilled. Because I never stood back and said, okay, what am I becoming in the process of this? What character am I developing? Is the goal, the big thing? Well, in 100 years, it's not going to matter. Somebody else is going to be here, has all your stuff. Like we talked about before. In 100 years, it's not going to matter. So what does matter? What makes God smile? What are you doing today to make the divine proud of you? Whatever you believe that divine force is. It's my question for you today. Alright? And take some time. It's said in meditation practice and everything like that, where you basically just get in a quiet space and just let your mind go blank. Your mind will have different, things, the way that our mind is built and everything, different things that will cross your mind, but you don't attach to any of it. You just let these thoughts pass, and you let your mind be quiet. And in that quietness, you will start to see some solutions to your problems and directness, but you have to be able to surrender what you're holding on to that is hurting you. And that's one thing I had to experience in my life with some of the people that I was involved in, that I thought loved me, that I thought had my best interest in mind, that I thought was coming to save me, and then I realized there's only one individual coming to save me, and he rose from the dead. There's nobody in this world that's going to advocate for you more than you advocate for yourself. Okay, that's just the truth. Don't waste your life thinking you're not loved by that divine source. If I've learned anything from all the near-death experiences that I have encountered, that I've had myself, spiritually transformative experiences, so on and so forth, two main things. When I talk about these in my books, I may have mentioned them on podcasts before. I don't know, I've slept since I've recorded some of those episodes, but why we are here, why we exist physically in this consciousness of humanity. There's no man an island. There's nobody that's alone. We are all interconnected, and everything that exists in this world and the divine's creation is also interconnected. And there's living atoms that are vibrating in every single thing, whether it's living or non-living. And like I said earlier, science has been trying to make life from non-life for decades now. Can't do it. Life has to come from life. That's I believe one of the proofs, if there ever was a proof, that the spiritual exists outside of this universe. So that God exists outside of this universe, and also inside of this universe, and everywhere. Inside, outside, everywhere. Okay? Because if you think that God just lives in you and doesn't live outside of everything, if God lives in a 3-pound brain, that's not a God worth worshiping. And a lot of atheists believe, God lives inside of you, like that's all there is. No, it's much bigger than that. It's much bigger than we can even fathom. Even if our brain was operating at 100%, there's no way we could even understand where God came from. Doesn't matter, because where did time come from? And time has a beginning and an end. When the universe was created, we had a trinity of trinities was born. We had past, present, future, length, width, height, a solid, liquid, gas. I mean, all these things became out of what we consider the Big Bang. All these things originated from somewhere. And that somewhere cares about you more than anybody else on this earth. So keep that in mind. I want you to have a good spiritual walk, regardless of what you believe. I'm not here to change your mind. I'm just here to give you a spoonful of hope that there's hope tomorrow, hope today, and hope always as you go through your journey. And I want you to enjoy, because happiness is an inside job, just like that quote I read from Eckhart Tolle. The thing is, like, happiness is an inside job. Everybody is trying to shove what I call, stuff into a God-shaped hole. That's what C.S. Lewis, the famous author of the last century, would call it. Would be a God-shaped hole. The only thing that fits in there is the divine. You can't stuff a bunch of Amazon packages in that God-shaped hole and expect to be happy. You can't stuff a bunch of new cars and bigger houses and more. And that's the thing. Our society is completely addicted to that consumerism lifestyle of, I've got to have this to be happy. It's all a lie. It's all fed by the world and by people trying to profit off of your money. Look inside and surrender. Okay? And I'm not bringing up any particular religion, but like the word Islam itself means to surrender to the divine, to surrender to God, to Allah in that case. So I bring other religions in here and that kind of stuff that I talk about. I am definitely a hardcore Christian, but whoever's listening to this, like you understand the meaning of that. You understand why I walk into a store to brighten somebody's day. Like I just did this morning. I went to go buy something at the gas station. The guy's on the phone talking, I believe, Arabic or Bangladesh or maybe Hindi of some kind. And when I left, I said, Namaste. I've talked about that before. Namaste. And he said, Namaste. And he smiled. That may be the only time he smiles all day. You may be the only Bible anybody ever reads. But you're spreading spiritual manna in the desert. Because this world is definitely, broken. There's certainly issues. I'm trying to help you see the positive side of what is the reality that you're in. Because our perception is formed out of our reality. And our reality is performed out of our perception. Our perception basically leads the way of how we perceive the world. So what is your worldview? How do you see the divine interacting in your life? Or do you at all? And what does that mean for your life? So one of the things I like for you to leave this podcast with is asking yourself the question, how can I make God smile today? How can I make somebody's day brighter? And I've talked about this before too, like the old school, I guess back in the 90s, early 2000s, the random acts of kindness. Go do something good for somebody. Try to do one of those things a day. I also try to learn something new every day, and I've been doing that for over 15 years now, ever since my son was born. I'm always trying to grow and better myself, because as Grant Cardone, famous billionaire real estate guy, would often say, in business or in personal life, you're never in neutral. You're either growing or you're shrinking. You're either getting bigger or getting smaller. You're either progressing or digressing. Okay? We want to move forward. That's the whole goal of this podcast, is to feed you the hope that you need to fight another day. I am personally on a mission to stop suicides, especially with our veterans. One reason why I do what I do with the Christian fishing ministry that I've been a part of for over 10 years now. I'm getting back involved with them. I've kind of taken a break from some of the activities there, but I've been volunteering in a lot of other places, like digitally with Indie Radio with Lee Whitting. I'd love to enjoy that Facebook community and the Facebook page. The whole idea is to sprinkle sunshine everywhere, is to give love and don't expect anything in return. But don't be like I have been in the past, to the point to where you give and you never get it back, and you never have a bucket to pour out of because that bucket is empty. I've been there many times in my past because I'm such an empath and I give so much. I never receive the same back. Where do you get the hope from? From the divine. The divine will refresh you. The divine will fill your cup back up. But you have to surrender all that you're holding on to, as far as things that aren't good for you. Okay, I'm not going to say sin and death and all that stuff and be all religious and everything, but I am going to say, at a spiritual matter, the divine will show you the way if you surrender and trust the divine wholly with everything. You would look at some people's financial situation that live like that and say, oh my gosh, they don't have a 5-year plan, they don't have anything like that. No, it's one day at a time. It's one day at a time. And living in the present moment, which is something that a lot of these great thought leaders and spiritualists like Eckhart Tolle teach, is the present moment. The time that you and I are spending together right now is all that you have. Past is gone, the future's still ahead of you. But see, our mind wanders off to all these different crazy places, except for when we're silent and we listen and we concentrate on the breath of now, is the best way I can call it. We sit there and breathe and concentrate on breathing, and we concentrate on the life that is inside of us. Because like I've said a few times now, life only can come from life. There is no other way. Alright? So what came first, the chicken and the egg? The old saying, that kind of stuff. Don't worry about that. Just worry about the fact that you are loved. Life has to come from life. And that there's a force in this universe that is loving you right now more than you've ever been loved before. Never more, never less. You've never been more loved than you are right now. Now, additionally, that force never changes. That love never changes. No matter how bad you are, no matter how good you are, the love stays the same. And it's a greater love than we can ever experience in human form. Because it's above human form. So consider that. Embrace that love in your life. Don't trust in people. Okay? I mean, certainly some cases, yes, you need to trust in people. But don't trust in people for your future. Trust in the divine. Okay, don't get caught up in all this mess that the world, throws at you. That you're not enough, that you gotta have this to be happy, and all these other things. That is all a lie. Sure, there's some. I mean, I've been ordering from Amazon lately. The guy I'm living with out here, that owns the property I'm living on. He basically says, I've never seen somebody get so many packages in my life that's ever lived out here. And I'm like, I'm running a business from, where I'm living here in this little tiny space. So I was like, that's just the way it is. So I buy stuff too. I'm not saying I'm totally anti-consumerist and totally minimalist and everything like that. I like stuff, but I don't let stuff have me. And it's one of the biggest things that I see people who are very wealthy, they get consumed by wealth, and then the things that they own them. And then where's the silence to listen to God? It's all consumed by stuff. It's all consumed by the news and media and, social media and, doom scrolling as they call it, and all these other things that are just worthless wastes of our time. They don't build us. They just hold us back. Make good choices. Thank you so much for watching, reading, and listening. Also, into the podcast here, let's go ahead and recognize our flagship sponsor, which is EverHope. It's ever-hope.com. Hope for today, hope for tomorrow, EverHope. These are little cuff bracelets. I wear mine all the time whenever I'm out in public especially, but it's a reminder, a daily reminder that there's always hope, which is what this podcast is all about, living an empowered life with hope. And I'm going to have Michael Schreiner on here soon, Dr. Michael Schreiner, psychologist. He is a wealth of information about the human psyche and human behavior and those kind of things, and I absolutely love his vibe. I think you will too once I interview him. So, anyway, sky's the limit, guys. Go after it. Make today a great day. God bless you, and we'll see you next time. Have the best day ever.